Now, everyone's familiar with Checkpoint, one of the founders of the firewall technology. We're really excited to have Brian here share with you his expertise on how Checkpoint behind the scenes is really making this digitally connected community, students, faculty, administrations. You could probably include parents, PTA groups, governments who support educational institutions. How do you get all these different groups all interacting securely and efficiently? Checkpoint has some very exciting tools. Brian's one of their leading executives, technology security evangelist. It's a pleasure to have him here. Brian, all yours. And I do want to point out, lastly, that Stephen Dixon, up there north of the border at the College of New Caledonia in British Columbia, is the winner of our third $50 gift card raffle. So, Stephen, I look forward to doing events not just in Seattle and Portland, but driving across the border and going up to beautiful Vancouver and hopefully meeting you in person. Just email me back to get your gift card. Brian, all yours.
Ron, can you hear me okay? Can you guys hear me? All right.
Yep, hear you just fine. You look great.
You hear me? You got a PowerPoint deck on screen, all right? Hey, this is Brian Linder from Checkpoint Software. And Ron, great event. Thanks for having us. And I confess that I've been sitting in on a number of the sessions as well, and I've actually learned something, a lot of things. I am Brian Linder. I'm going to tell you who I am and what I'm about, a little bit about what Ron said, and more importantly, what Checkpoint's doing. And then let's dive into how we can help educational institutions like yours create a secure digital environment. I'm going to focus on ransomware, as you've heard many times. First of all, if you don't know me, I'm a social media and broadcast media guy. I'm an evangelist, 25 years in the industry, all over the news and various social media. I'm also I was on NBC News and talked about some security implications of Amazon. So that's all great. Let's talk about Checkpoint for a second. 27 years in the industry, as Ron said. So about 100,000 customers around the world in 88 countries. So we're an established player. My role, most importantly, for the last 2 years has been, and this will be a benefit to you, has been in the war room for what we call workforce security. So the user, the teacher, the student, the administrator, you name it, any element of education. My job has been to sit in a war room and hear and tell stories about what we're seeing. And today you're going to hear some of those stories. So 27 years of leadership, a portfolio around security that is quite expansive and has evolved. And I'll relate specifically to what you see in the upper right here, which is all about securing our users, no matter who they are, as Ron said. Let me get right to the good stuff. First of all, Checkpoint, in addition to providing the solutions that secure 100,000 customers around the world, also has a research arm. And that research arm does nothing all day but look at trends based on a massive amount of security data that we see pass across a giant network of secured infrastructure around the world. And in July, we observed a 29% increase in attacks against education, the education sector, as compared to just the first half of the year. Now, that's not very surprising, is it? You probably already knew that. In fact, I think at least 3 of the presentations have talked about various ways to carve up the threats that you guys are facing, and we've certainly seen it. It's certainly a validated thing. And I will say that it's one of the biggest problems we see is an upward trend because, frankly speaking, education is such I'll call it a palpable target for bad actors. But there's more bad news before the good news starts on this. You guys, of course, know about notable ransomware attacks that have hit education. Howard University being one of them this year. It wreaked havoc, and I'm not going to talk too much about the question burning in everybody's mind around ransomware, which is to pay or not to pay. I may touch it at the end. The other one, of course, is UCSF, and there have been, in fact, in 2020, one of our partners, Comparatech, did a great research piece that talked about approximately 1,740 educational institutions that have been hit, impacting north of 1.5 million students. It's a tremendous problem. In Checkpoint's view of things, we have seen at least 10,000 organizations around the world for which, if they had paid a little bit more attention to investing in preventative solutions, which you'll see in a minute, would have been happier today than they were, having paid ransoms and or been hit with downtime. So it extends, of course, way beyond the educational sector. Let me take a minute to do something that I'm not sure has been done today yet. So again, hopefully I'm not duplicating, but I want to take you a little bit deeper into the evolution of ransomware and explain to you what the potential impact of this is on your organizations, and why what I'll do at the end of my session, the second half, is talk about how you can protect yourselves against this. We've had several presentations today where people have talked about how to respond to a ransomware attack once it happens. So I enjoyed those presentations. I will tell you that if you're wondering whether you're a target, I can assure you that you are. Nobody is immune to this, and it's just a matter of time more than likely. But let me tell you about what I'll call the vectors of extortion and why these attacks have become so successful. And I'm not sure you've heard this at any level of depth, so hopefully you'll get something you haven't seen here. First of all, you understand today that the reason why these have achieved so much press, and this is, by the way, this is out of the Wall Street Journal's recent section on cybersecurity, which was absolutely fantastic. The modern ransomware attack, for example, is not just about encrypting machines or disrupting operations. It's about extorting victims. Okay, so let me take you through a little bit of the history of our ransomware attacks here as I jump slide to slide. Well, look at that. We're out of order on our slides. Look at that. Well, how about if I just speak to it? We started several years ago with ransomware attacks that were based on, of course, encrypting disks as they spread. Today, we've achieved not only one, but 2 and 3 additional vectors of leverage that these attackers have. First of all, the first thing any good ransomware attack does is hop on your network and discover all of your data, and it may take its time doing so, and collecting that data on your students, on your faculty, on your institutions, and preparing to disclose that data, stealing it, exfiltrating it, and preparing to disclose that data. They're also preparing other means of attack, such as, for instance, all of your students' personal information, your parents' phone numbers, call lists. So when the ransomware attack initially begins, they will say you must pay a ransom, and at which point, as previous presenters have alluded to, hey, let's not pay that ransom. Well, if you've reached a point where you're not in a mode of choosing because you haven't prepared for this moment, you may say, well, we're not going to pay your ransom, at which point those attackers may come back and say, we're going to disclose personally identifiable data. We're going to call your parents. We're going to call your students. We're going to sell all the personally identifiable information. We're going to launch a denial of service attack against your school district. We're going to tell the press about this ransomware attack. So you have multiple ways that these bad actors are coming at you, looking to extort your payment. So let's talk about ways we can stop and prevent these attacks before they even start. I want to highlight one more problem that we're all facing today. While the bad actors are evolving, we are facing what amounts to what some have termed the Great Resignation. Have you heard of this? This is the mass shift, the mass movement, the mass departure of employees from many, many institutions, whether they be educational institutions or commercial institutions. People are leaving their jobs, and they're doing it because, number one, they grew tired of them in the pandemic. They know that they can get better paying jobs elsewhere. So that's all fine and great, and we have this great mass exodus of people. But let's put this in cybersecurity terms for you. Number one, we have already a global crisis in shortage of good cybersecurity skills. We have tons and tons of need. We don't have enough skilled people to fill that need. Now what's happened is people that are even in those roles are moving. The cost of acquiring good cyber skills has shot up. Our educational institutions, in some cases universities, and in almost every case, our K through 12s, can't afford to bring the best talent in. So there was already a shortage. Now everybody's moving around in the world, and we can't afford the right level of skill. So where does that leave us? While the bad actors are evolving, where does that leave us? It leaves us in a very, very bad situation. By the way, a little aside, I had to pull this out of today's Wall Street Journal. You're allowed to laugh at this. One of the newest trends that we're seeing now in the middle of the Great Resignation is that people are putting their vaccination status on their resumes. I thought that was really interesting. Really great article in the Wall Street Journal. recommend you check it out. So will you put your vaccination status on your resume? Let's get right to this. Let's talk about the fact that we have too few cybersecurity experts on our teams. We know the bad actors are evolving, and now let's break down the complexity of our educational systems, environments, and institutions. Number one, you got people working in the school, on the go, out of their homes. You've got virtual learning going on. You've got administrations that maybe have come back. Some of them are working from home. You've got roles and responsibilities that differ greatly. You've got applications on the web, in the cloud, on premise still, in a data center. Maybe it's hosted. We have as a service applications like Office 365 that are extremely pervasive. So our threat surface is exponentially increasing. The complexity of all this has been highlighted in the pandemic as even more complex, and we need to figure out a way to get our arms around this. So I'll introduce you to a solution that we've come up with, and I'll dig a little bit deeper into how this works. It's called Harmony. It's a solution from Check Point that covers the consolidation of 6 major user-related experiences through security, whether they be endpoint security, clientless connectivity, the VPN, which is slowly going away, securing email through things like Office 365, securing the browsing of the internet while in the institution of the education or outside of it with devices that are owned and operated by the education, and the great blind spot, mobile security. I wish I could see your hands right now because I'd like to do a hand raise. How many of you have any kind of security control at all on your mobile device? Well, no one's probably raising their hand. Number one, they're saying, well, why would I allow somebody to put a security solution? Why would I allow my educational institution to load any software that provides any kind of security on my mobile device? It's my mobile device. I do what I want. So this is one of the great blind spots, how mobile devices are going to become and are becoming one of the greatest threat vectors. We unify all this through a solution called Harmony. You'll hear me talk about it in a minute as I get a little bit down and dirty into the details of how the actual experience works of providing this level of security. Let's kind of take the second half of my 20 minutes here and talk about how educational institutions can prepare themselves for the inevitability of a ransomware attack. And we really see this as 3 parts. And other presenters have talked again about responding to these attacks after they happen. Perhaps all of your devices have become encrypted. We're taking it about 3 steps ahead of that. We're going to see how we can stop that from happening first and foremost. Very first thing we want to acknowledge is that the endpoint itself is, of course, the place where we need to be focusing all of those security controls. Because let's be honest, our users, unfortunately, represent our weakest link. It's not their fault. We try to train them. We invest heavily in training people. But let's be honest, none of our educational teams pretty much are experts in cybersecurity, nor would we expect them to be. So the idea here is to kind of take as much away from the user. Don't put them in a position where they have to make decisions about how to properly use that endpoint or if a link is presented. Let's apply artificial intelligence to prevent stuff from ever arriving at their eye before it ever even happens. So we're preventing ahead of time. And I'm going to talk a lot about anti-ransomware. What I'm going to do is I took a couple examples right out of our war room that I'm going to show you here live. I hope this works well on the virtual platform, but why not take a risk, right, Ron? Take a little risk here and there. And I'm going to show you what it looks like when a ransomware attack actually begins on an endpoint. Perhaps somebody has clicked a link, and I'm going to demonstrate this across, 9 or 10 of ransomwares that have occurred over the years so you can get a feel for how serious this actually is. Let me just clarify one misconception about ransomware. And this particular, this is called the attack chain, as you see here. The attack chain in real world is a very, very complex thing. It's not something visible to the naked eye. You're looking at all these different steps in a what I'll call an evolved, we call them Generation 5 attacks. And in particular, it all ends up usually with a particular piece of malware like an executable, which you can get your arms around eventually, that gets dropped and deployed. And most next generation antivirus tools might catch that. And the one thing I want to communicate to you today, if you take away nothing else, is that next generation antivirus is a great tool to have, but by no means is antivirus even going to come close to stopping the spread of a ransomware attack or any other attack for that matter. So that's all fine and good. But why don't we look at a greater, I'll call it mitigating the actual kill chain. Let's remediate all of those pieces that have gone awry, including efforts by things like ransomware to delete what are called shadow copies, stop the encryption, all of the aspects of this. So you need to be looking beyond just antivirus to make that happen. And a solution from Check Point like Harmony will ease that completely and remove the complexity of it. Let me talk about ransomware. Let me explain to you that ransomware, first of all, in a minute, let me clarify something. Ransomware is not one attack, okay? Ransomware is actually a cottage industry, if you think about it. Ransomware is an evolved industry that has been dominated now by rentable as-a-service platforms for the bad actors, partners that have acquired skills and partnered up with these platforms. But what I want to emphasize to you today is that by the time the ransomware begins its encryption, you're already 99% of the way down in the attack. So much has happened already. That ransomware attack has begun months ago. Some bad actor has penetrated the network. Like I said, they have exfiltrated data. This particular partner platform, this as-a-service, ransomware as-a-service platform, is busy discovering the network, targeting your students, targeting your administrators, targeting your local government institutions, etc. By the time you reach a point where people are seeing an encryption event from ransomware on their laptops, you are all the way at the end of the process. Nonetheless, that is a last resort. How can we stop that ransomware, or should I say, can we stop it before the encryption even happens and before the attack continues? And I'll demonstrate that to you with a little bit of a video here. Let's see if this works. Now, Ron, can you see a video moving busily along here?
Yes, I can. There's not sound, but we can see the window moving up to cry lock.
The only sound is the droning of my voice. There's no sound needed. What you're looking at has come right out of our war room. So again, when the pandemic began and when these attacks started to ramp up, we put all of the ransomware attacks we could get our hands on from 2021 on backwards, and we ran them through the mitigation, the defense that I was explaining just a moment ago, which is called Harmony. And I want you to see how this technology, the evolution of this technology, and how it is stopping these ransomware attacks in their tracks. Again, what you are seeing is the last phase of what I'll call, put in quotes, a good ransomware attack, which is to you and me a bad ransomware attack, but the ability to stop this from happening. Now, I've heard a few people talk about whether to pay the ransom or not. Should we pay it or shouldn't we? And I will tell you that in our experience, and we have dealt with many, many, many customers, unfortunately, that have been faced with this decision. And I'm going to talk at the very end of my presentation, leave you with a couple of takeaways about ransomware and about how to prepare for this eventual day. But by the time you have reached this point, if you don't have a control like this in place, your decision is removed from you. But if you do have a solution like this in place that is stopping it in its tracks, you have more choices. Okay? That is the main point about paying ransom. We'd all like to say, oh, you don't have to pay it. Oh, well, don't pay it. But you need to give yourself the choice, and you do that by putting controls in place. Check Point is not the only solution today you've heard about that can help you make that can help you retain the choice, okay? But certainly it's a key piece of your strategy there. So anyway, that's a little bit about how that works. I will touch briefly on the technologies that are blending on the endpoint. Remember I told you that next generation antivirus is nowhere near enough to stop it? Take a good look here. You may not know what all these do. You may not know what content disarm and reconstruction is. You may not know that taking a Word document apart and stripping off all the dynamic content like macros can cut 90% of the attack success of 90% of attacks out instantly. But what you should know is that it's nowhere near enough to simply have a next generation antivirus sitting on your endpoints. You're nowhere near it. You can see you need several areas unified to present that protection that you need, and we deliver it through something called Harmony Endpoint. How many people are using Office 365? I can't see your hands because we're not live. When are we going to be live, Ron? Don't answer that. I know, next year. But basically, we want to be securing should I say, taking the decision out of the user's hands. so that they're not the ones that are being forced to decide whether a particular email is legit, because ransomware attacks are frequently starting by tricking a user into clicking on something. So how can we stop it? Well, we can stop it by looking at not only links in those emails, but in some cases, when it's not immediately obvious, we apply intelligence through our threat cloud to say, wait a minute, that website is malicious, could be malicious. Maybe the guy that registered that domain has been known to register other bad domains, things that are not available to the naked eye. This is all through Office 365, for example. So it's a key part of the solution. This is real-time phishing protection. The ability to take a downloaded file off the internet that looks legit but has malware in it, to sanitize it. The ability to take any email attachment and sanitize it ahead of time before the user has a chance even to double click on it. For example, converting a Word document into a safe PDF document, stripping off any malware that could be seen. So there's an awful lot of vectors of attack that come in here. It is probably likely that one day your teams will be faced with a need to respond, okay? And that is done through a few tools, mainly what are called forensics tools. The ability to, number one, know what happened. Should I panic? Should I let's triage this. Should I panic? What are the elements of the attack? What are the attack types that have been seen? Augmenting the security skill on the fly of your teams that, of course, we can't hire the right people. Maybe we're partnered with them, but I'm trying to augment their skills on the fly. What's the business impact? Basically, how far did it get? Did it get in, and how did it get in the first place? Who clicked it, for example? And did we remediate it? Can we have confidence knowing moving forward? Maybe you guys have heard of something called the MITRE ATT&CK framework. The MITRE ATT&CK framework is a tremendously organized way of classifying impacts of a cybersecurity compromise. And our tool here, of course, allows you to overlay and correlate on top of this MITRE framework, which makes things quite a bit easier and, again, gives your teams the edge in remediating. So that is a little bit about forensics. There's one more piece of the secret sauce. We call it Infinity MDR, which basically says, look, I can't possibly process the millions and millions and millions and millions of events that are coming across my educational institution. I've got the right security controls in place. I've partnered with Check Point. I've got security gateways. I've got endpoint security, mobile security. I'm even in the cloud with them. I'm securing my various cloud instances, my Office 365, but I don't even know where to start. I got one IT guy that does all this. He doesn't know where to start, and he's busy doing 100 other jobs. Well, MDR is managed detection and response, the ability to automatically, with intelligence, sift through those millions and millions of logs and reduce them to actionable events in some kind of triage, okay? So you've got a lot of tools at your disposal to bring this forward. I just want to emphasize that it is possible to not only prepare for a ransomware attack, but respond to it and thereby retain the choice that of paying that ransom or not. And even if you paid it, it's not foolproof. Let me wrap up with 3 best practice categories, and then I will cede the stage here. And I think I'm good on time, right, Ron? I'm okay on time, right?
You're too good a speaker. I can't cut you off right now, so I'm interested.
Okay, well, I'm going to stay within my respected time frame anyway. Let me talk about 3 ways you can actually take action here to manage the day that's coming for you. Number 1, you've heard it many times. I'll repeat it. Require multi-factor authentication across your enterprise. Make sure you have solutions in place that are providing phishing prevention at the user level. I'm talking about Office 365. I'm talking about your web browsers. Make sure you're taking those decisions out of those end users' hands. It's not their fault. They're just doing their job. They're not experts. They wouldn't know. Make sure you have a strong CDR solution in place, a solution that takes a Word document as it comes down to a user and strips that dynamic content off prospectively, making the assumption that those users don't need that, and they don't, because most documents you just don't need it to reduce your blocks. There's a few other things here, including patch management. Hopefully you have discipline around that. Now, what about limiting the impact of an attack like this? Well, make sure you're segmenting your networks with logical zones. Look at a zero trust architecture. Most people have heard of that. We could spend an hour just talking about that. I've heard the one solution vendor talked about backups, and air gapping backups, making sure that in a ransomware attack, if my backups are online, you might as well write them off. So make sure that you're backing up to the cloud, or that you're doing backups that are physically air gapped from the networks that are exposed and could be attacked. Gold images, make sure your servers have gold images, so a build sequence that is tested, rehearsed. You know how you've taken an image of that server when it was clean, so restoring it would be very easy. And of course, least privilege, the principle of least privilege, separating duties. And finally, as I talked about mostly today, managing the response, have a good incident response plan. Who are you going to tell? Who are you going to communicate to? And how am I going to quarantine those assets? Well, a tool that you saw today, like Harmony from Checkpoint, will enable a completely automated way to quarantine suspected assets, to remediate them, and in the unlikely event of a water landing like that. So next steps, grab your phone. Ron, I don't think anybody's grabbing their phone, but grab your phone, hold it up, take a picture of the QR code. We have a program where you can try Harmony Endpoint for 90 days for free. What's that?
Like this?
I can't see you. It's okay though, but I trust you're holding your phone up. Scan the QR code. You can get 90 days free of Harmony Endpoint, and I encourage you in a sandbox to throw some ransomware at it and see what happens. Or I can just send you the video that I played. Secondly, we can go a little bit deeper with a personalized demo. So this is a little bit about ransomware, the impact of it. Nobody should consider themselves protected from this without putting the right controls in place. So I encourage you to give this some thought. And great sessions, Ron. Thanks for the time today, and I am a wrap for today.